On the monitor, Lewinsky jumped to his feet as he heard the sensor chime. What do we have, Mr. Land? Tachyon surge at search coordinates Alpha Mary Bravo. There is a cloaked object at those coordinates. Eyes ahead, Mr. Land. The monitor eased forward, closing in on its enemy. On the bridge of the Avatar, Salutrell leapt to her feet as she heard the communications chime. Tran called out, Commander, we are receiving a coded signal. Picard is on the Challenger. What is the signal source? Commander Salutrell, it's a signal from Kirk. Without thinking, Salutrell holstered her disruptor. Yes! Battle stations. For the glory of the Empire. Battle stations. On the monitor's bridge, Land called out. She's powering up her engines and moving out. The Avatar of Torment slipped from orbit and banked away in a course that would return it to New Titan. The monitor moved through space behind her, not even disturbing the light of the stars it crossed. Braced for battle, both ships flew for the Challenger. In the Challenger shuttle bay, Riker tightened his grip on his phaser. You're both going to sickbay for analysis. Captain Picard, what's the status of the Borg on your scout ship? He thinks I'm Locutus. He piloted the scout ship here. A tremor rumbled through the deck. Warning lights flashed as the shuttle bay doors began to slide shut. Will, what's happening? Riker to bridge. Is there another Borg ship in transit? Captain Sim answered. Negative, Commander. The monitor has just informed us we're about to be attacked by a Romulan vessel. Riker frowned at Spock. Friends of yours, Ambassador? Commander Riker, it is evident your emotions are being heightened by the danger we are in. Tell it to Kirk in sickbay. Then Riker saw Picard's shocked expression. What did you say, Will? Riker didn't know where to begin. It's Captain Kirk, sir. He didn't die. He was brought back somehow by the Borg. Picard faced Spock. Is that why you've done this? Betrayed the Federation so the Borg would give you back your captain? Do you know nothing about me, Captain Picard? A profound silence lasted until Riker asked Worf to have the Borg and the scout ships beamed to the brig. And for the rest of you, sickbay. Riker turned to the personnel airlock leading back into the ship. A shadow moved there. Then Riker saw the glowing tip of a phaser node swing out from the edge of the airlock. He didn't even have time to feel the hard metal plates that rushed up to meet him as he fell. Picard felt a sudden wave of heat and static charge pass around him. Beverly and Data were still standing beside him, dazed, but they were surrounded by unmoving bodies. Beverly turned to Data. Have we been hit? Your armor appears to have protected you, and I require a higher power setting to be immobilized. A voice spoke from the airlock behind them. Thanks. That's good to know. An orange beam blasted Data and sent him skidding across the deck like a broken doll. Picard and Beverly whirled to face their attacker as he emerged from the shelter of the airlock frame. Kirk? The captain of the First Enterprise smiled. What did I tell you on Viridian? Call me Jim. Then he raised his phaser again and fired. The phaser beam struck Beverly and she crumpled to the deck. Picard clenched his fists in frustrated rage. You're not Kirk. You're a monster. Perhaps I am. You know, I keep setting this phaser to kill, but then I can't fire it. Why is that? Picard eyed Kirk incredulously. The ship's security field prevents unauthorized personnel from discharging phasers on board. Kirk glanced at the bodies that littered the hangar deck. Then how was I able to shoot them? The field must have been modified in here, in case there were trouble with the Borg. The Borg were the ones who brought me back. Do you have any idea why they brought you back? As a matter of fact, I do. You see, if I'm to have any peace, I must kill you. The Challenger's deck heaved as the great ship shuddered beneath her wildly fluctuating defensive shields. Picard knew immediately she had taken a severe hit. He and Kirk stumbled but kept their footing. Then Kirk leapt at him and smashed him to the deck, striking out with unthinking rage and hate, and the Challenger bucked. Kirk flew forward, jarred by the impact. The shuttle bay went dark. Picard leapt to his feet as the emergency lights flickered on. but Kirk had already vanished in the shadows. Picard had no choice. He ran through the airlock, turned to the left, ran toward the shadows beyond the flickering corridor lights, pausing just long enough to be certain Kirk followed, leading him away from his fallen friends. High above New Titan, the Challenger hung dead in space. On the bridge of the Avatar of Tomed, Tran carefully considered what he saw on the main screen. It is a trick. They are lying in wait for us to attack again. Our victory was too easy. Salatrell also looked at the main screen. The Challenger spun slowly off-axis. Its propulsion lights were out, only a few running lights still flashed. She regarded the other ship with scorn. Only a fool would leave his ship in such a vulnerable condition. Tran stood to face her. Please, Commander, he's baiting us. Remember the Battle of Icarus IV. But it is not his weapons we must be concerned about. Salatrell snarled a warning at Tran. The other ship is gone, Sub-Commander. Prepare for final approach. Target the support pylons to break her apart. No survivors, no prisoners. Proceed. Tran turned back to his controls. The Avatar of Tomed began her final run. On the undetected monitor, Lewinsky slapped his knee. We've got her! The mood in his bridge was electric. Captain Sim of the Challenger had played his ship like the magnificent instrument it was, absorbing incredible energies by diverting the Warbird's power to the areas where he would do the least damage. And the commander of the Romulan ship had fallen for it. Put us on intercept, Mr. Land. All I want you to do is fuse its disruptor cannons, tear apart its torpedo tubes, and target its exhaust ports. Decloak at your discretion, and as my noble ancestors once said, yee-haw! The Avatar of Tomed dropped her cloak for her final run. The Warbird rippled against the stars, taking on its solid, visible, threatening form. But just before Salatrell could give the command to fire, her shields flared with a sudden overload, allowing Starfleet phasers from the decloaked ship to pierce her defenses and fuse her weapons ports. 30 seconds more, and Salatrell knew her ship would be dead. And Kirk would survive her. Engage transwarp. Take us out of here, Tran. On the main screen, the Challenger diminished until it was no more than a single point of light, no larger than a star. She would return for Kirk. And when she did, the full force of the collective would be with her. Lewinsky's mouth dropped open as the Warbird dissolved into light before him. Woof! How long have the Romulans had that? T'Pur replied, I do not believe it is part of the Empire's traditional armada. Coupled with its non-standard weaponry, it is logical to assume that the Warbird has been extensively retrofitted by the Borg. Lewinsky thought about the ramifications of that, then dismissed them. Just tell me they didn't know we were here until we dropped out of cloak. Mr. Land confirmed it. The cloak modifications worked, sir. They had no idea we were here at all. Lewinsky patted the side of his chair. Then there's still hope for the Federation after all. Kirk paid no attention to the starship that appeared to be tearing itself apart around him. All he saw was his prey, farther along up the corridor. With a roar, he attacked again. The captains met head-on, and their hands found each other's throats. Picard heard the pounding of his heart. His vision was flickering in from the sides. He saw the same loss of focus coming to Kirk's eyes. After Riker had recovered from Kirk's phaser stun, he ran into the corridor and found the two captains locked in mortal combat and shouted, That's enough! The next one who moves gets a Force 3 stun. But Ambassador Spock stepped forward into Riker's line of fire. I do not believe that will be necessary. Riker lowered his phaser so it was aimed at the deck. Kirk and Picard stood together, spent, breathless. Kirk's attention was absolutely riveted on Spock. Spock! I am most pleased to see you again, Captain. Can you help me, Spock? Yes, Jim. Kirk glanced at Picard beside him. Oh, good. Because I don't think I can kill him by myself. Spock moved quickly to stand between Kirk and Picard. That is not what I meant, Captain. You are under the influence of Borg programming. The implant responsible has been removed, but the patterns it laid down are still affecting your thoughts and your actions. Spock raised his own hand, but not in the traditional Vulcan salute. Kirk stared at him. A mind meld. Spock nodded. You will be able to draw strength from me until the Borg patterns have faded. But Picard protested. Will, you can't allow this. If they're both under Borg control, that could be a way to cover their tracks. Spock turned to look back at Riker. There is another way. There was silence in the holodeck after Spock's explanation. Then he took a moment to compose himself and put the fingers of his right hand to the katra points of Kirk's face. My mind to yours, Captain Kirk. Then Spock turned to Picard. With his left hand, he found the other man's katra points, sought the same connection. My mind to yours, Captain Picard. And with that, the two generations joined. Spock touched the deadening, frightful power of the Borg in both minds, took its measure, met its challenge. He reached out to them both, giving each his strength, his wisdom, and his logic. But then, in that thrilling exchange, one dark shadow rose from the depths to join the swirling mix of minds. A shadow of the Borg. Not from Kirk, nor from Picard, but from Spock. Spock gasped in pain. I have seen them. I have walked with them. We are Borg. We are V'ger. Except for the almost subliminal hum of the air circulators, Captain Sim's austere ready room was silent. Kirk was already there when Picard stepped in. He held his hands behind his back, gazing out at an observation window at the stars. Kirk turned in a welcoming grin. It's all right, Captain Picard. I don't want to kill you anymore. Picard smiled and went to Kirk to shake his outstretched hand. They each had been examined and treated after Spock had been taken to sickbay. Together they walked to the observation lounge off the Challenger's bridge, where the officers were already assembled. Kirk stood before the view screen, on which was an image he had hoped never to see again. V'ger, a corruption of Voyager, the name given a space probe launched from Earth at the end of the 1900s. Earth lost contact with the probe a few years after it passed outside the boundaries of the solar system. Somehow, the Voyager probe encountered something which attempted to repair it. Those repairs gave it self-awareness. Spock rose and continued the story. I mind-melded with V'ger. I saw where it had been, a planet filled with living machines. In joining with Captain Kirk and Captain Picard, whose minds both held strong and recent impressions of the Borg, the connection was clear and self-evident. V'ger was reconfigured by the Borg, or more correctly, by a different branch of them. And because I mind-melded with V'ger, the tendrils of that collective remained within me. Picard took over. Which explains why the Borg would not assimilate Spock on the hypercube station. Picard looked at Spock. I don't know how I can apologize to you, Ambassador. He looked up at Kirk. Or to you, Captain Kirk. Kirk waved the apology aside. No need, Captain. We were each put in play by a different aspect of the Borg, and what better way to save the Federation than by the sharing of knowledge? And what better way to defeat the Borg? Riker was the first to bite. Excuse me, Captain Kirk. Are you saying the Borg can be defeated? Kirk grinned. Each of us has had a piece of the greatest puzzle facing Starfleet. My contact gave me background data on transwarp conduits and the hypercube station that somehow maintains them. Captain Picard had all the technical information about their ships, which was necessary for him to lead them into battle. And Ambassador Spock has seen their homeworld. Kirk turned back to the view screen as the final image appeared, a star chart with one star marked in red. Kirk pointed to it. This, gentlemen, is the central node of the Borg group mind. Destroy it, and each branch of the collective will be cut off and alone. LaForge voiced an objection. Captain Kirk, that's a chart of the Delta Quadrant. To get that far would take more than a century at maximum warp. Kirk walked over to Picard and put a hand on his shoulder. Fortunately, while we were all playing cat and mouse, Captain Picard and Dr. Crusher were performing their duty. In the shuttle bay of this ship are 2 Borg scout ships with functioning transwarp engines. In 10 hours, the conversion of the Monitor into a transwarp vessel will be complete, and then we're going to kick the Borg clear into the next galaxy. The 4 captains stood on the bridge of the Challenger as the view screen showed the Monitor coming about. Kirk, Picard, Sim, and Lewinsky. Lewinsky watched his ship with a pang of regret. The Monitor had been turned over to Picard. But Lewinsky wasn't one to hold grudges. Captains, in an operation such as this, when a ship receives a substantial refit and is sent on such a noteworthy mission, it's not unheard of for it to receive a new code designation for the duration. Lewinsky to Monitor. Come in, Mr. Land. Lewinsky told him to angle the Monitor 17 degrees off the Challenger's horizontal axis to get some glare from the sun. A band of sunlight hit the first of the new pattern that his refit crew had etched into the black microcoating that covered his ship. He turned his attention to Kirk and Picard beside him. The fabled name flashed across the hull of the starship as ephemeral as a ghost, but never to be erased from the minds and hearts of those who saw it. USS Enterprise. Lewinsky smiled and said, "Least I could do for her captains." The Borg world orbited a sun long dead, serving as the center of gravity for a paltry system of 3 planets. There were no natural life forms left on it, no free water, no stones or soil. Everything was engineered. The results of millennia of work and reconfiguration, giving each molecule a function, each shape a purpose. In standard orbit above that world, the Avatar of Tomid coasted in space 100,000 light years from home. Spread out before Salatrell, secure from attack, was a vast Romulan armada. Not the Empire's, but hers. And assembling with them, joining the spread wing formation of Romulan victory, were the key to absolute victory: 11 Borg cube ships. As Salatrell watched the mighty cube ships slip in to join the spread wing formation, she whispered, "Victory." Beside her, Vox responded, "Perhaps." How can you doubt the triumph of the collective? We do not. We doubt the victory of the Romulan Armada. Picard and Spock escaped from the transwarp station. You were unable to detect the new class of Starfleet vessel. You were unable to destroy Picard. You are weak. I took a chance, and there will be success. She felt Vox turn to her. Surprisingly, his scanner eye was dim. He looked at her only with his real eye, the one that somehow still connected to his Romulan heart. Run. Nothing can stop them. Vox? The Borg Romulan reached out to her with his organic hand and took hers. Leave while you can. Tell me what I must do. But the scanner eye rekindled and painted her with its inquisitive red beam. Do not fight us. Resistance is futile. Salatrell stared at him, wondering of her future and the future of her people. But her course had been set long ago, when James T. Kirk had entered into the tail of Icarus 4 and murdered her grandfather. Everything that had happened since was the responsibility of the Butcher of Icarus. Even the Borg Romulan invasion of his brutal Federation. Tran looked away from his board. Commander, a transwarp conduit opened, then it closed, but sensors didn't show that anything came through it. Vox stated bluntly, "That is not possible." Salatrell rose to her feet. Tran, did you scan for a cloak? Yes, Commander, but I found nothing. Salatrell turned to Vox. It must be an anomaly. Vox stared at her cruelly. Or James T. Kirk. On the bridge of the new Enterprise, Kirk saw Spock check the displays on the arm of his chair. Helm, take us into the second planet. I believe it is the one I saw when I melded with V'ger. Picard stepped up to Spock and pointed at the screen. That's a Romulan spread-wing formation. They're on the brink of launching into battle. How do you propose this one vessel take on such a fleet, Captain? These Romulan vessels are clearly working with the Borg ships. Therefore, they are tied into the Borg communication system. Spock understood. And this vessel's deflector array is configured to deliver a subspace pulse to effectively blank out all operative subspace transmitters. Kirk looked puzzled. Will that destroy them? Picard shook his head. No, but best guess estimates say it will be 15 minutes before the Borg are able to reform the collective enough to coordinate their attack. In the meantime, we would be able to proceed unhindered. Spock agreed. Mr. Data, prepare to fire the deflector pulse. Salatrell sat beside Tran, double-checking all his sensor readings. The ship has to be somewhere in the system, Tran. Order all bird of prey into tight orbit of the Borg world. They are to scan for tachyons and fire on any sources. Suddenly, the warbird rocked as every ODN circuit lining the bridge arced with a power discharge. Tran, report. That was an extremely powerful subspace pulse, no damage. Salatrell was puzzled. What was the point of... She stopped as she saw Vox bend over, clutching his head and circuitry. Vox? The Borg Romulan looked up in agony. The collective is gone from our mind. We are alone. Tran shouted, near panic. Commander, he's right. The entire Borg communication system has been overloaded. The whole fleet is out of contact. Salatrell spun to the screen, clenched her fist. Kirk! It was the only answer. Silent, unseen, the Enterprise sped toward the Borg homeworld. On her bridge, Spock still held the center chair. That is the world I saw, without question. Riker stared at the view screen. I wonder why V'ger didn't return with a crew of Borg. Kirk responded. Who knows? It was a long time ago. Maybe the collective followed different strategies then. What we need to remember is, if this world is a living creature, then it's doing what all living things do. Evolving, growing, learning. Spock added, if it is a living creature, destroying it would be a crime against everything the Federation stands for. Kirk nodded. Then we'll cut it off. Picard agreed. Yes, the power of the collective is in its organization. If we can make this interruption of its communication system permanent, then we deprive it of its ability to organize its conquest of the galaxy. Picard stepped forward to better see the view screen and the world of light upon it. From my time with him, I now know that somewhere down there is the central node of the entire collective. We must find it, and we must destroy it. Picard turned to face Spock. If you agree, sir, this ship does have that power. Kirk thought Spock's response was noticeably grim. Provided we utilize it within the next 10 minutes, Commander. Spock addressed the helm. Mr. Data, scan the Borg planet. In a few moments, Data looked up. Ambassador Spock, I have located the central node. Spock nodded at Kirk. Captain, if you would target the central node. Kirk checked the coordinate readouts. Target locked, Mr. Spock. Worf announced from his station, 4 minutes to reacquisition of communications. And then the Enterprise shook as the first barrage hit, sending half the crew to the deck as the ship began to dive. Tran shook his fists in the air in triumph. Direct hit, Commander! Alone, of all the Armada, Salatrell had brought her ship in close to the homeworld, and her suspicions had been correct. On the bridge view screen, she saw the rippling effect of a cloaking field dispersing and knew she had caused considerable damage to the Starfleet vessel. She turned to Vox. See, a single ship is of no concern. Did you not read its sensor returns? It had located the central node the Collective could not hold. Well, what about the famed Borg redundancy? There can be only one Collective. Salatrell smiled. At last she knew. The Borg had a fatal weakness after all. Sub-Commander Tran, fire at will. On the bridge of the Enterprise, Riker shouted, "Where the hell did that come from?" Picard called out, "Pull up!" Data was already involved in doing just that, leveling out the Enterprise's path so it would not repeat the ignominious end of her predecessor by crash landing on the Borg world. Everyone on the bridge worked in perfect balance. Riker reconfigured the sensors for maximum tachyon sensitivity. The instant the sensors picked up the tachyon signature of the cloaked ship trailing them, Data transferred the coordinates to Kirk's weapons controls. Kirk launched the torpedoes less than an instant after that. The Avatar of Tomid spun twice on its vertical axis as a quantum torpedo struck its outer starboard hull support. Tran brought the Warbird back into trim and continued its pursuit, but its cloak dissipated as quickly as had the Enterprise's. Data looked at the view screen. It's a Warbird. Kirk recognized it. I know that ship. Can you get a closer image? The view screen fluttered as magnification was enhanced. Data read the Romulan script on its Raptor prow. The Avatar of Tomid. Kirk smiled. That's her, Salatrell. Spock arched his eyebrow. Fascinating. She is the one who set all of this in motion. Kirk punched the controls and fired more torpedoes. The Warbird swerved to avoid them. Then the Enterprise shook as the Avatar struck out again. Kirk targeted the Warbird's rear hull support and fired 2 more torpedoes. Data cheered. Direct hit! Her shields are fluctuating! Fluctuating! Gone! Spock sat forward in his chair. Mr. Worf, open a hailing frequency to the Romulan ship. Suddenly the bridge filled with streamers of power sparks. Data looked at his console in disbelief. Direct hit on us! On the screen, the Warbird sped forward. Data warned the crew. They're attempting to ram us! Riker ordered, all hands, brace for impact. But Kirk left his station to seek out Data. Data, do you trust me? That is a curious question to ask at this time. Then move over and get me LaForgian engineering and stand by on the cloak. Data blinked. Sir, in 28 seconds, we will be spinning debris. Trust me. Kirk smiled. He was changing the rules. Moments before impact, the Enterprise rippled within its cloak and disappeared. Tran informed Salatrell. They're cloaked. Salatrell sneered. A meaningless act of desperation. Stand by for impact. But the Warbird moved smoothly on course. Salatrell was out of her chair and by Tran in a second. Where did they go? The view screen flickered with rapid views of the volume of space surrounding the Warbird. There were no sensor traces anywhere. On the bridge of the Enterprise, Picard shook his head as he watched the view screen. On it was the back hull of the Warbird's Raptor prow. Kirk had slipped the Enterprise between the Romulan vessel's double hull. Riker announced, Captain Picard, Captain Kirk, the Warbird is activating its internal sensors. They must have guessed our strategy. Spock nodded. Mr. Data, on my mark, you will use station-keeping thrusters to initiate a 360-degree lateral rotation. Drop the cloak to put full strength into the structural integrity field. Salatrell grabbed the helm as she saw the Starfleet vessel shimmer into view between the Avatar's hulls. She knew that in seconds it would begin to rotate and that there was nothing left for her to do. This is all your fault, Vox. Vox actually smiled. No, this is all the fault of James T. Kirk. And since you are the one who brought him to us, you did this. On the view screen, just before the image winked out in a flurry of static, Salatrell saw the starship vessel begin its rotation. The bridge shook. Salatrell heard the hiss of escaping air. And with an endless scream of rage, she was sucked out through the rent in the hull, knowing she fell through stars that still shone on Kirk, but which would never shine on her again. By rotating within that enclosed space, without having to fight the force of the Warbird's shields, the Enterprise opened the ship like a hatchling splitting an egg. The shell of the Warbird spun away in a glittering cloud of tumbling debris, fogged by a frozen, sublimating cloud of escaping atmosphere. And from that cloud, like a phoenix reborn, the Enterprise broke free and continued on her mission. On the bridge of the Enterprise, Riker looked up from his console. 1 minute to acquisition of communications, but we have no weapons left to destroy the central node. Kirk left his weapon station. Send me down, Spock. There has to be a self-destruct mechanism or a power generator I can put on overload. You will be sacrificing your life, Captain. Kirk grinned. Beam me down, Spock. I'll take my chances with the Borg. Picard stepped up beside him. I'll go with you. Kirk shook his head. Don't forget, I'm the one with the nanites eating through me. You have a life ahead of you. Not if the Borg are allowed to continue unopposed. Let's see if there are any answers we can find. Together. Kirk nodded. Their pact was sealed. When Kirk stepped out of the armorer's storage room laden with phasers and photon grenades, Spock was waiting for him. It's all right, Spock. I had a second chance. Not a lot of people can say that. I am... Spock faltered. Kirk understood and finished for him. And always will be. Your friend. In the transporter room, Kirk found Picard burdened by the same array of weaponry on his own equipment harness. The deck rumbled underfoot. A weapon's impact. Spock's voice came from the speakers. We have been engaged by a bird of prey. Communications capability has returned to the enemy fleet. Please transport at once. We will loop back in precisely 800 seconds for an emergency beam out. On the homeworld, Kirk and Picard materialized outside a massive metal door, at least 10 meters tall. Kirk drew his phaser and blasted the door's locking device. It swung open with a gust of foul air, and the two captains advanced together. 200 meters later, the passageway opened up into a vast interior space that made Kirk think of the Grand Canyon turned upside down. A Grand Canyon of black metal and endless pipelines. Below them, on a lower plaza 10 stories deep, a sunken dome stretched away kilometers wide, its surface pulsing with flashing traces of cold blue light. Picard folded his tricorder shut. That's the central node. Kirk turned to the captain. Now, why don't you go back? Now that we've found it, I can deal with it. But can you deal with them, Captain Kirk? Kirk turned to look in the direction Picard looked, along the wide deck that ran from the passageway in a sweeping circle around the glowing dome and sunken plaza. He saw what Picard saw. Borg. Thousands of them. Marching closer. Kirk and Picard ducked behind a power conduit more than 5 meters thick. Picard pointed to a switching lever on the side of the stained and mineral-encrusted metal that formed the pipe. This lever will do it. It will cut the power to the central node's core and trigger a feedback surge that will burn out all its circuits. Picard, how can you know all this? I don't, but Locutus does. The massive approaching Borg was coming closer. Then we should cut the power now. No, Captain Kirk. We have to time it for the Enterprise's return. That way, there's still a chance for us to get out. How do we hold them back till then? Picard smiled. You don't. I do. Picard opened a black carry-all pouch. Kirk glanced inside, saw the Borg interface. To destroy the Borg homeworld, Picard must become Locutus again. Picard attached the neural plate to his face. The power cell and the subspace transmitter were already strapped to his chest. He jabbed the jack home. A faint blue crackle of energy leapt along the input cable to the power cell on Picard's shoulder. Picard's eyes rolled back in his head until only white remained. Beyond the conduit, the Borg horde advanced. And then Picard rose to his feet beside Kirk, facing the enemy as it approached. Kirk stood as well. Picard, is it working? Picard stared at Kirk as if he were nothing more than the metallic debris that littered this world. We are Locutus. We are Borg. Kirk grabbed Picard by the shoulders, shook him. Fight it, Picard. Picard's eyes cleared. Jim, it wasn't supposed to be like this. It's too strong. Kirk twisted Picard around to face the advancing Borg. Tell him to stop or I'll cut the power off now. Picard screamed and swung at Kirk. Resistance! Resistance is futile. Kirk grabbed his arm, held him. You are Jean-Luc Picard. You are a starship captain. Act like one. And Kirk slapped him and slapped him again until Picard brought up his hand and caught Kirk's arm in mid-swing. I think you've convinced me. Picard faced the Borg, now no more than a handful of meters away. We are Borg. The collective is safe. Return. Return to your functions. Kirk tensed as he watched the Borg hesitate. Picard's eyes fluttered. This power cutoff, Picard. How long do we have after we throw it? Picard held his hands to his head. The feedback is immediate. The instant we throw the lever, the node is... Whoever pulls that lever will die. Kirk had heard enough. He grabbed the interface cable and pulled it free. Kirk checked his tricorder. We've got 60 seconds till the Enterprise does her flyby. Picard nodded. I can take it from here. In case you don't remember, Jean-Luc, whoever pulls that lever and destroys the node gets trapped in the power surge, and I'm already dying. Spock's voice crackled out of Kirk's comm badge. Enterprise, to away team. We are at 30 seconds to emergency beam out. What is your status? Kirk slugged Picard in the jaw as hard as he could. Picard dropped like a dead weight. Kirk dragged him away by his collar until he was well away from the power conduit. Kirk to Enterprise. Spock here. Keep the ship out of danger, Mr. Spock, and lock onto my signal. 1 to beam up. Then he tossed his comm badge onto Picard's chest and stepped back. Picard reacted to the impact of the badge. His eyes opened, he started to speak, then dissolved in the transporter as the Enterprise once more claimed her own. Kirk turned back to the power conduit, grabbed the lever in both hands, felt it move easily. Then he closed his eyes, squeezed his hands tight, pulled, heard a sudden, deafening roar of thunder coming from the dome. Then he heard a scrape as quiet as a footstep behind him. Kirk turned, opened his eyes, saw the... On the bridge of the Enterprise, to which he had been directly beamed, Picard shielded his eyes against the sudden glare from the view screen. On it, a blinding column of light shot up from the Borg homeworld directly from the location of what had been the central node. Ripples of explosions began to spread out across the homeworld surface, following the strict lines and angles of circuitry. Beside him, Beverly Crusher took his hand, Riker stood beside her, Data and LaForge sat together at the helm. At his station, Worf made no effort to hide his eyes from the light, and Picard saw tears roll down Troy's cheeks. He knew the counselor was overwhelmed by the emotions of all who surrounded her, their joy, and their grief. The explosions spread out in a web of fire, encompassing a third of the homeworld, as 1,000 other cube ships broke from its surface and jumped to transwarp, fleeing the death of whatever this planet had been. There would still be Borg, somewhere, Picard knew, but the Federation had been preserved because of one man. Riker spoke their thoughts. "A great man has died today." Spock turned to look at Riker. His expression was disturbing, both unfathomable and familiar. Finally, he spoke. "Captain Picard, now I believe the bridge is yours." Picard watched in silence as Spock slowly left the bridge. When he was gone, Riker turned to his captain. "Did you see the look on Spock's face? I've seen it before, at the salvage camp. Spock still doesn't believe that Kirk's dead." Picard looked at the comm badge in his hand. He remembered fleeting images of what he had seen in Kirk's mind, what Spock had shown him there. "There are always possibilities." The Borg homeworld was a blazing pyre, bringing light to a system that had been dark for a time too long to be measured. Triumphant, victorious in the new dawn's light, the Starship Enterprise set course for home. One voyage at an end, the ongoing mission far from over.
Star Trek: The Return was written by William Shatner with Judith and Garfield Reeves-Stevens and read by William Shatner. It was adapted for audio by George Truitt. The recording engineer was Mike Hanley. The tape editor was Stephen Strassman, with post-production and sound design by Gary Fink. Additional post-production by Stephen Strassman. Original music was composed by Sam McCalley, Carl Schurz, Eve Biglarian, and Richard Emk. The associate producer was Florence Barreau Adams. Star Trek: The Return was produced and directed by Linda Woolman.